Today, we're diving into the teachings of Apostle Michael Arokbo on a really personal spiritual journey. We're looking at what he calls a spiritual technology, a kind of systematic process designed to overcome one of the toughest struggles out there, lust. So let's get into how this whole thing works.
Right off the bat, we're grounded in a problem that feels so modern and just inescapable. The speaker paints a picture of a world where temptation isn't something you have to go looking for. It finds you. It's everywhere, on your phone, in movies, just walking down the street. It's a constant, relentless flood.
And this leads us to the big question of this whole explainer. When the methods you're supposed to use, like fasting and sheer willpower, feel like they're failing against this onslaught, what do you do then? What's the strategy that actually gets results?
To answer that, we've got to first understand the nature of this fight, which is framed here as a pervasive, all-encompassing struggle.
He shares this personal story of feeling completely beaten down by life. He'd fast for days, right? Only to walk outside and immediately be confronted by the very thing he was fighting against. It's this incredibly frustrating loop where even your best efforts seem to go nowhere, and you just feel powerless.
So the turning point in this story is fascinating. It didn't come from some new technique or a book. According to the speaker, it came from a divine instruction to stop looking for answers out there and to start listening to an inner voice, a prompting from within. And this set him on a path he never expected. Which brings us to what's called the counterintuitive path, because the solution he was given had almost nothing to do with lust itself, at least not at first.
The very first instructions were surprisingly indirect. Forgive people who'd wronged him. Give generously even when it was tough, and stop seeking public recognition. Now think about that. The battle against lust actually began by tackling bitterness, selfishness, and pride.
And this is where the genius of the strategy really comes through. See, the idea is that lust isn't some isolated issue. It grows from the same root as a lot of other desires, self-gratification. Unforgiveness feeds our pride. Greed feeds our desire to have more. The need for honor feeds our ego. By dying to these things, you're systematically starving lust at its source.
It was only after that foundational work was done that the journey moved into what the speaker calls the technology of prayer. This completely reframes prayer. It's not a first resort, but a powerful, multi-stage process that you actually have to earn your way into.
And he gives a pretty stark warning here. He says that rushing into intense prayer while your flesh, that pride, that anger, that bitterness is still running the show is actually dangerous. Why? Because that same part of you can hijack your spiritual progress. You might just end up trading one sin for another, which gives the devil a brand new vulnerability to exploit.
So this technology of prayer is laid out as a three-phase journey. First, you get rid of the things holding you down. Second, you build your spiritual focus. And third, you actually receive divine power.
So what are these weights? Well, think of them as all the spiritual and emotional baggage we tend to carry around. Anxiety, fear, resentment, anger, you know the stuff. In this context, they're not just feelings. They're spiritual anchors that literally make you too heavy to rise up.
This source material uses this powerful metaphor. An eagle can't soar if it's weighed down, right? It has to be light to catch the wind currents. In the exact same way, a person has to be spiritually light, free of all that baggage, to catch the wind of the Spirit and actually travel in prayer. The first part of prayer is just about letting go of that weight. Once those weights are gone, you get to phase 2, building stamina. But this isn't about how many hours you can pray. It's about the depth and the persistence of your focus. It's that moment when you can finish praying, go about your day, and realize your attention is still completely locked in on God. That is real spiritual stamina.
From there, you enter the third and most dynamic phase, charging. This is where you start receiving divine supplies. The speaker describes it as a totally tangible experience. You can feel the anointing like oil, you become a battle axe for God, your spiritual senses open up, and you see things beyond the natural mind. And at this point, it's not even just you praying anymore. A spirit from within actually begins to take over.
This entire technology, this whole process, has a destination. It's a place, a state of being, that the speaker simply calls the presence.
The teaching says that the presence is the only place where true fundamental change, or transfiguration, can happen. It's described as the place where you were first created, so it stands to reason it's the only place you can be recreated and reconfigured by God from the inside out.
Reaching this state is the climax of the whole journey. After ascending through those phases of prayer, a door opens and a voice invites you to come up hither, into a higher dimension of direct fellowship. That's the goal of the entire process. But this profound personal transformation, it turns out, isn't just for you. It serves a much larger purpose, which brings us to our final section, becoming carriers of the fullness.
To get this, we have to understand the spiritual hierarchy that's being described. On one level, you have demons that tempt individuals. But at a much higher level, there are these beings called princes. They don't just influence people, they influence entire societal systems. They're described as the forces behind things like widespread corruption or cultural shifts that redefine core values like beauty and marriage. You don't just cast them out, they hold territory and must be displaced by a higher authority.
And this is the end game. A person who has completed this spiritual journey becomes a carrier of the fullness. They're no longer just an individual believer. They are now a functionary of God's kingdom, equipped with the spiritual authority to actually confront and displace those ruling princes.
This really shows that this technology is not some self-help program for personal purity. Its ultimate purpose is to raise up individuals who can bring light into a dark world by challenging the spiritual forces that are actively shaping society.
And that's what we've walked through. One single, integrated spiritual technology. It doesn't start with fighting lust, it starts with forgiveness. It moves through a disciplined, multi-stage prayer process, and it ends with becoming an agent of divine government on earth.
Which leaves us all with a final thought to chew on. If this process is a map that takes you from personal struggle to societal impact, it really forces you to ask a pretty personal question. What anxieties, what fears, what bitterness might be the weights that are holding you back from your own ascent?